Welcome back and a very good morning. Today we are celebrating the past 1 week, or rather over the weekend, the world celebrated what we call the International Press Freedom Day. And here in Kenya, a major conference was held at the Kenyatta International Conference Center, bringing participants from the region to look at the state of the media in the region and emerging issues in the practice of journalism and media freedom generally. The President, Uhuru Kenyatta, spoke, and he had quite a few things to say about media freedom and the way journalists are doing their work. So in the studio today, we have a privilege to have the Chief Executive of the Media Council of Kenya, which is the statutory body charged with overseeing media, media monitoring, media regulation, self-regulation. Also, welcome Haron Mwangi, Dr. Haron Mwangi. Also, we're joined by Patrick Gadara, media commentator, communications expert, and renowned blogger. The online media is becoming a big issue, and we are privileged to have Patrick Gashara with us as well. And of course, Mutegi Njau is back after celebrating May Day too much, Labor Day too much. All right, let's start with you, Haron. The celebrations over the weekend, a lot of activities happened, culminating in the award of journalists of the year awards. But just give us a recap of how were the celebrations?
Well, this time they were well attended. We had about 500 people for 2 days. That is second Friday and third on Saturday. We drew delegates from the whole of the region: Uganda, Tanzania, Kenya, Sudan, parts of southern Somalia, and South Africa, Burundi, and all that. We also brought in the delegates from the county media, county-based media, original media, community media. We housed over 150 journalists from the region. So basically, we'd say that across the country, we had all representation. We had also county directors of information, so that basically we link again the media with the county. So I would say that this time the attendance was very good. Right. In terms of papers, we had very nice papers presented. The critical issues were discussed, ranging from the role of media in development in Kenya, the role of media in giving an Kenyan story, the role of media in insecurity, the role of media and national identity in Kenya, and so forth. Of course, again, we look at the challenges of freedom, we look at the challenges of responsibility and accountability of journalists in our country. So basically, it was a mixture of many things that are emerging within our country and within the region.
Yes. The central thrust of it also was how far we have traveled in terms of independence of the press in this country.
Yes.
The panel discussion convened to discuss that. What is your general, or what was the general feeling, and what is the state of our media in terms of press freedom right now?
I would say that we will not complain of constrained freedom, in my own view. And in the last 1 decade, we have seen very vibrant media. We have seen free space. And the challenge has been that media has been at the forefront in terms of reforming other institutions, reforming the institution of judiciary, the land issues, election issues, and all that. But we forgot that the media was an institution that also required some reform. And therefore, the centrality of media and the fact that there are so many people who are interested with the media, politicians, the government, the people, the media industry themselves, is a very contentious. There's a lot of tension in that process. And therefore, introduction of regulation in the media, again, brought a lot of issues because of that diverse interest. And it's because of this attempt to regulate and to make media more sane in terms of its operation, in terms of ownership, in terms of security issues that are emerging, in terms of self-regulation, in terms of the code of conduct, in terms of professionalization. All these issues are being regulated, and therefore there's a lot of contention, a lot of tension between various stakeholders. Yeah. That is why you can see a lot of debate going on about media regulation. Some people in the media would say that the media is being constrained. Politicians would say, no, media need to be regulated. Media industries say, no, we want to be free. How much freedom do we need? Yeah. So basically, those are contentious issues. And I believe that we can, as we have done with other reforms, we can also do the same with the media reforms.
Yeah. Patrick, I'll come to you shortly to weigh in, but our last one before I even go to Mutegi.
Yes.
I mean, we have fought for this freedom of press for so many years, 20 years. and we thought the entrenchment of freedom of press in the Constitution and access to information, Articles 34 and 35 in the Constitution, had secured all these grouses about press freedom and lack of access to information.
Yes.
Why is it that we are not celebrating yet, that we are happy we've arrived in the land of honey and milk?
The problem is that already we have these provisions within the Constitution, which is very good. And it is happening even in Tanzania has this provision. Rwanda has these provisions. Even Rwanda is at Article 34.
Yes.
But the problem now is that we want to operationalize these provisions through legislation in Parliament. And it is that legislation process that is contentious. It is that legislation process that people, are raising, alarm. For example, now we had the Media Act 2013, which I would say that 97% of that act is good.
Yes.
But for us to get there, it was very acrimonious.
Yes.
We had a lot of negotiation with members of Parliament, with the CIC, with the government. It was not very easy to get to that level.
Yeah.
But again, we were unable to push the kicker, which
Yes.
again took the entire freedom given in the act.
Yes.
And that's why now the Media Council and other stakeholders are in court. So the issue is that the executive has an agenda in terms of the way they are even interpreting the laws themselves. We are in court ourselves because of the integrity, to protect the integrity of that act, because the executive was playing about with the interpretation.
Right.
So you can see that the operationalization of the provisions in the Constitution has become very contentious.
Okay.
Yes, Patrick, as
yeah.
an outsider,
Yeah.
maybe.
Yeah.
The president made some comments in that conference about about freedoms and responsibilities. What's your take on that?
Well, I do agree that media need to be responsible in how they execute their mandate. But I think the bigger point here is that the government itself is an actor and a beneficiary and a target of the operations that the media undertakes. Lots of your reporting, lots of media reporting is about the activities of government. When we talk of responsibility and it's government that then defines what is responsible journalism, then we've got a problem. Throughout for...
Who should determine what is what?
Well, the Constitution is fairly clear, and I think it points towards the media regulating itself. Self-regulation is one of the pillars of the things we were fighting for in the 90s. We don't want to take the media back to a situation where it's regulated by the very people it's supposed to be keeping in check. I think when you look at the laws that have been passed recently, you mentioned the media bill. I think you would also look at the amendments to the KICA Act, that essentially create this body or empower this body, I think it's called the Broadcast Commission, to do the work of the Media Council. And the people elected or appointed to this are essentially presidential nominees. So it's the president essentially taking on the power to regulate, to decide what is good content. I don't think that is in the interest of anybody, aside from the executive itself, in terms of damping down on coverage of it.
Okay. Patrick, I want to move from the legislation. Well, we can grouse a lot about the legislation, inadequacy of it, or interpretations and so forth. How about the practice? Looking in, and the way we do our job, can we say the media in Kenya is actually independent and performing its proper role as a watchdog, reporting effectively on society and what is going on?
I think there are two issues. First, that you just mentioned, first is whether the media is independent.
Yeah.
Now, nominally it is. And I would hasten to add that compared to what we had in the 90s and previously, the media space has expanded a huge deal. But is it independent? Who owns the media? Lots of our media is still owned by politicians, still drives an agenda from them. When we look at press, and especially the ownership structure and how media is consolidated, you've got huge media companies owning radio stations,
TV,
newspapers and stuff. We've got to ask, whether this is inimical to our idea of having a profuse voices being aired, and how this ownership structure then causes or becomes a point at which control can be exercised. And that's the first thing. The second thing is whether media has actually been doing its job in spite of the various constraints and the environment in which it finds itself. I don't think it has. I don't think media has asked the questions that it should have asked. Going back to before the elections, during the election, there's been a lot since the Gichopevu expose being ventilated about that. But I mean, seriously, the media did abdicate its role. Then they practiced something called peace journalism, which was essentially things go wrong, don't say anything. You know, look at things like the fire at JKIA. Government says it produced a report. Has anybody seen it? Is anybody asking about it? You know, what lessons do we learn from that? Look at Westgate and coverage of Westgate, which I thought was atrocious. You know, we still don't know what went on for 4 days inside that mall. You know, we don't know.
So your report card is that the media hasn't been as probing as
I think what I would
informative
say,
as it ought to be in those circumstances.
What I would say is that the media does bring out certain bits of information. You know, a lot of what we know about what happens comes out in the media, but it is never fashioned into a story that is contextualized, you know, so that allows people to make sense of it.
You can't get a complete picture.
Yeah, I mean,
when you get from the Kenyan media of what the situation is or the truth is about any particular thing.
Right. I mean,
Haron.
No. What do you think is the reason?
Well, I think firstly, I mean, we've got to look at, and it's hard to say, but we've got to look at the caliber of the journalists we have. I mean, people like yourselves who've been there for a long time are not the people writing stories, and I don't think they're exercising mentorship over the new breed of journalists who've come. And what happens is stories are reported sort of in a sensational manner. So this happened today, but it's never linked to what happened in the past. And so we never draw lessons. We never are allowed to see where we are going wrong, because it's a blast, like yesterday's attack, you know, it just happened. But we've had a string of this. What are the things that link them? You know, what are the investigations that have been done? You know, what have they shown? What are the lessons to learn? How do we prevent the next one? You know, this is what I would expect media to be interrogating and asking.
What is your report? You know, I mean, Haron, Media Council of Kenya is charged with overseeing media performance, even generating reports about its work. We have not seen a report.
We produce reports and circulate these reports online on a monthly basis.
Right.
We engage journalists, editors on the same. But allow me to say this:
yes,
that you cannot divorce the status of media in Kenya from regulation, really, because I think that defines the structure, the processes, it defines even the performance. But to add on top of what he said, training was one of the key issues that arose from the convention.
yes.
Number one, there was a feeling that the kind of caliber of journal that we are producing at the universities is quite poor, and the competencies that we require is not there. And there was a resolution that training of journalists should be done at postgraduate level. You did a bachelor's degree and then you went for a postgraduate diploma in journalism.
Right.
That's the caliber of people. But it is difficult for you to put on board a journalist who has gone 3-4 years training with a D or a C+, and then you expect that journalist to report. You're saying that he has the nuts and bolts of reporting.
Yes.
But do you have the materials? Do you have the information? What are you going to report on? So one of the challenge here was the issue of training. Number two, on what he talked about, the diversity and plurality of voices. Is concentration of media necessarily wrong? Is you have 6 big companies in United States owning media. Does it perform? It does with regulation. Media is business. What we need to look at, how do we regulate concentration and cross ownership of media? I think that is a big debate we need to look at. Just to mention one thing, for example, we do not have proper laws on regulation of ownership. The other day, Radio Africa sold 49% of its stake to Times in South Africa. Which country allows its media to be sold to foreigners? That's one question. We have seen the media owners again debating in terms of should Star Times be given the
Well, the Nation Group is also owned 44% by a foreigner, right?
Yes. So we are now they are saying, do we have that kind of scenario in other countries? We don't. In fact, there is no country in Africa that has that kind of behavior.
But is foreign ownership in fact the
that
biggest
is one
threat?
of
In fact, local ownership
that is one of the
seems to
things.
me to be a bigger
I'm only
threat.
I'm just only
Yes.
saying that the contention of issues of laws
Concentration,
and concentration
yeah.
and policies is becoming also a very big debate that we also need to look at. But the quality of performance generally in our country is totally driven by commercial interest. So that
How would you rate the trends? I mean, looking back,
Yes.
you know, are we improving? Are we constant? I mean, you mentioned a poor quality of journalists coming
Yes,
into practice
yes,
because
yes.
they don't have the tools
Yes,
to practice.
yes.
But, you know, there are, of course, very bright guys I've
Yes.
come across in the current generation
Yes.
who are super.
Yes.
But assessing the trend, are we going down? Are we going up? Where are we? Or we're just
In,
there?
in terms of diversity of content, we are doing well.
Diversity.
The diversity of content, we are doing well. The problem is the quality of that content. Take for example,
Yes.
we have now 55 minutes of news hour, prime time, at 9 o'clock. Out of that 55 minutes, only 25 to 30 minutes are purely good news. Not even good news.
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 Yes.
The rest is just commercial and promotions and so forth and so forth. You are kept gluing on the TV, really, just to watch commercials. Some are very well crafted that you think you're watching a movie. We are asking ourselves, are we informing Kenyans adequately? Are we able to make decisions on the basis of information we are given? So the quality and the training is becoming a very big and contentious issue.
Trying to say
Yes.
something.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I go back to something that you said about training. And I think one of the things that I find concerning, and this goes back to, I think it was in 2003 when the media bill was first mooted. And one of the things that the media owners inserted into the bill was this requirement for journalists having a degree in mass communication. And I don't think that it is sufficient or even necessary, in my view, for journalists to possess a degree in mass communication. You know, I don't think that's what defines a journalist. You know. And actually, one of the problems I had with that bill was the attempt to define a journalist as opposed to somebody who practices journalism. You know, in which case you would look at people like Gado, you know, who practices but really were educated as an architect. You know, or Mado, for example. I mean, I used to be a cartoonist, so I can cite examples along there. You know, and even along the entire range of the journalists who we have known, very few of them actually went to school to study journalism. What they did was practice it. You know.
And when I never studied journalism.
Right, and so that's my point.
But
So
you're counting minorities. Of course, the majority have been through the formal training.
Yes, but
and
my
of course,
point
there is something that training brings on board that equips you to do the job.
true, it
There could be
does.
exceptions who excel without training. Those, okay, let's call them yellow card holders. They come on the job, they learn the job, they become good, and there's in-house training. But you cannot farm the foundations of journalism must be on some training, I would say.
I mean, I would counter that.
External or internal?
I mean, I would counter that. I would say quite a lot. I mean, right now we've got lots of bloggers, for example, who are now writing for the mainstream press, who are becoming journalists. You know, they didn't need to go to.
Harold, do you agree with that?
Let me just finish my point. My point is, we shouldn't be discriminating and saying that if you don't have a degree in this, you cannot practice journalism. You know, that is the first point that I think should be clear. Journalism is about expressing many voices, you know, and it doesn't mean that it's a degree that allows you to do that. You know, as you said, it's a marketplace. You write well, you've got good skills, you will get a job. You know, if you, on the other hand, if we simply say you only have to, all we're doing is removing these voices from the public discourse. You know.
In that
I
case,
think
citizen journalism?
What?
Citizen journalism.
Well,
Would you
citizen journalism is to be encouraged. I think is to be encouraged. I mean, I like it that when over the weekend when the media had its big powwow giving away awards, so the bloggers were doing the same. Now, I agree. Even among the bloggers, there are issues that need to be addressed. I'm not sure that they are necessarily issues to be addressed via legislation. You know, I'm actually one person who really shies away from the idea that government should be regulating the very people.
All right,
who are trying
let
to
me
keep
hear
it
what
in
Harun
check.
has
Yes,
to say
I
regarding
think
two
three
things,
things.
training and professional practice, and how the two work
Already we have a case in court about bloggers, for example. And we know that, in my own view, both as a scholar and as a practitioner, a blogger is not a journalist by definition.
Is not.
Journalism has a process. Journalism has gatekeeping process. You cannot sit down, write some things on the internet and post and say you're a journalist. You can write, you can do those things, but by profession, by definition, you are not a journalist at all. And in fact, you should not even enjoy the privileges of a journalist. And that's why they're in court already, trying to push the idea of being recognized as a journalist.
Yes.
Journalism has a process, it has a gatekeeping process, and therefore, in my own view, they didn't qualify from that, in that context. Number two, you cannot purport to just say that because you know how to write and you have got beautiful voice, you qualify to be a journalist. There must be some training. It must be anchored on philosophy of journalism. You must know the implication of what you're writing. You must know the standards. You must know the code of conduct. Those are issues that are putting us in trouble. And we are saying that there is always a very big correlation between people who appear in the Complaints Commission and the training. In fact,
there is.
We just receive very few people who have gone through journalism training coming at the council. But we have a big chunk of people that have never gone to class. You see a very popular journalist saying, what is a code of conduct? But he's a popular journalist. So in that extent. And there are so many in radio, but
that's
one,
my big beef also.
Absolutely. So we are saying that, for example, there was one very popular journalist or radio presenter that appeared in the commission, and she said, and she only said, I have never seen a code of conduct booklet.
Yes.
But he generates 0.7 billion shillings per year for that radio station.
Yeah.
That's the kind of problem we have.
That
Therefore, what I'm therefore saying is that basic training in journalism is very, very important. Get to know the code of conduct. Get to know the implication of the communication process.
I guess the point is that not everybody who is practicing journalism, or what can be termed as journalism, should carry themselves out or describe themselves as journalists.
You're right.
Perhaps you need to isolate the practice from the title or the reference. So that, because a lot of people who are involved in communication or dissemination of information in any form, including bloggers, but they do not qualify to be called journalists because of the process.
You're right.
In journalism, as you say, there's something called news processing.
Yes,
the story is written, submitted to somebody who edits it, who then passes it on to the next level before it's disseminated, whether it's a newspaper or through broadcast media, whether it's radio, TV. That is a process that then eliminates journalists from, or isolates journalists from non-journalists.
Right.
I would think that's what you're saying.
Absolutely.
But that does not mean then that the law should constrict those who want to practice information dissemination.
It hasn't.
That freedom ought to be there.
Actually, it hasn't. Freedom of expression.
Let's see what Patrick thinks about that restriction.
Actually, it has. When you craft a law that defines not the process of journalism, as you said, but who a journalist is, that law offers certain protections to that person who is regarded as a journalist.
Yes.
That by implication are denied to other people who are not recognized as journalists. So for example, when it comes to revealing sources, journalists can very well go and say the law does protect me from doing that. But a blogger who is now being put out of the coverage of that, even though he is practicing journalism, is not acknowledged as a journalist. So therefore he becomes vulnerable.
Yeah.
And that's the point, that's the distinction that I'm saying we should remove.
Then but who is monitoring bloggers?
Well, the state is monitoring them.
You see, the thing is, bloggers are free and at large. Journalists are constrained and belong to a certain framework, Media Council, or the Kenya Union of Journalists, or Editors Guild. There is a framework which governs their work, not really regulates, but they belong to, they are members of a certain professional society.
Belonging to a body that defines
professional society which describes who they are, and therefore they must ascribe to a code of ethics or some standards, which is what is missing with the blogging fraternity.
Again, and I will go back to this. It is about the practice of journalism, and we can sit and define that. And anybody who practices that then comes under the ambit of that. And don't forget, it's not just about protections, it's about
Let
responsibility.
me ask you, Patrick,
Yeah.
are bloggers journalists?
Yes, I think so. I think in as far as, now let me finish.
That is the definitive,
Let me finish. In
yeah.
as far as they practice journalism,
What is journalism?
They are-
Because
journalism,
information
in as far as-
dissemination is not necessarily journalism.
Yeah.
Journalism is a certain
True.
craft encapsulated in certain codes and rules of practice and ethics.
right?
Yes.
And what I would say is there's quite a number of bloggers who actually adhere to these codes. You know,
Who
all
They
you
may
have to
even
do-
volunteer.
they don't even know.
Volunteer.
They don't know even
Who
the
makes sure they have
codes.
done it?
Actually,
Who makes sure they
now
have done
here's
it?
the thing:
Yes.
who makes sure that they have done it? That's a good question.
Yes.
You know, if we said that the Media Council, for example, regulates the practice of journalism, not journalists, then anybody who goes and writes something about whatever can be said, well, you have exercised, you know, your right or your obligation or whatever to the to the profession of journalism. You know, you have written something. You know, I don't like it. I've got a function. I can go to the Media Council and say, this person who is in the process, who is setting himself up as somebody practicing
All right.
journalism.
I want to move on from this because this is a side discussion to what we. But I think what Patrick is saying is akin to saying, because I know some medicine, I can tell somebody take this malaria queen or take this actor if you have a stomach.
Not true.
I am a doctor because you actually administer
Not
some
really.
medicine.
I think
that is too simple.
I mean, comparing medicine or the practice of medicine with journalism,
Because the doctor
is a
is a
problem.
person who is
to
qualified
me,
to
it's a
practice
problematic comparison.
Okay.
You know, there are reasons why. I mean, these are life and death issues
right.
when it comes to doctors.
What about-
But
what about
when it
somebody
comes to
who
people
purports to be a
having the ability
What
Yeah.
about
to
somebody who
express
purports to be an
themselves?
architect?
Yes.
You know, when people have the ability to express themselves, when people, it's not just journalists who find out stories. What we should be saying is anybody who's got that avenue, anybody who knows something, who is willing to put it out there,
May do
you
so.
know, may do so. Now,
But they may not style
wait,
themselves as
no, no.
journalists.
Whether you call yourself a journalist or not that's what I'm saying is not the issue. You know, are you practicing the journalism? And if you are, then you fall under the ambit
You
of
know,
journalism.
there's a problem with what
Yeah.
Gasfera is saying,
Yeah.
Gagara is saying, because when you do that thing you are doing of disseminating information, why is he calling it journalism? That's where I have a problem.
Yes, that's absolutely.
Because it could be anything else.
He's a free citizen.
Yes,
You can
you
express
can do
yourself
it.
through any medium.
Yes.
And you're doing that through internet and through
Yeah,
all those
that's
kind of
freedom of
things.
speech
But
or
doesn't make
expression.
you qualified to be
As
a journalist.
which
You
is
have
a
that
label
freedom. The freedom
reserved
of
for
expression
people
is
who
there.
uphold a certain
You see?
ethic.
Yeah.
All right, let's
Yeah,
move
let's
on
go
the
back to
discussion
what-
to,
yeah,
to
whatever.
something else.
Yes.
This country is, of course, under a lot of security issues and ongoing investigations, operations. A matter has been raised about how journalists are covering or reporting the security operations and terrorism issues in this country. What is your assessment of how this is being done? The people were saying that we are reporting too much. We should not be exposing some things. For example, the pictures which are in the people on the cover today and The Nation and all these newspapers about the bus that exploded.
Or the picture in the Sunday Standard that day after Westgate.
Or Westgate, that showed this woman, in this bad situation. People are saying we shouldn't show these things. I mean, the council obviously is going to get complaints from government and other people complaining or unhappy with this kind of portrait in the media. What is the standard of practice that is expected here?
The tension between the requirement of ethics and the need to inform the Kenyan on the gravity of this matter is becoming a big debate. It's a very big tension. Should we show these pictures for the Kenyans to understand that our country is under attack? Or should we not, because we want to protect maybe the victim or the relatives or something like that?
Or the country?
Or the country.
From,
So that has been a
foreigners,
tension.
investment.
But the bottom line, in my own view, is that is this communication helpful and is it for public interest? Is it ensuring that the Kenyans become more sensitive about their own security? They collaborate with the security agency? That they are aware that anything can happen? Are we educating them to be more responsible in terms of security matters? If, in my own view, they are doing that, then we can use these photographs. I I know, for example, that the photograph that was shown after Westgate became very contentious, and of course, you know, the editorial director was stepped aside to allow for investigation for 1 month, and they went out and they apologized, which was a good thing, you know, for Kenyans and for the media fraternity to show that they are responsible people. But then there's some certain photographs, for example, that were shown the other day by the Star on what is happening in Southern Sudan.
Yes.
And again, they were very contentious.
Yes.
But remember the same silence that occurred in Rwanda. The world woke up just one day to realize there was wanton destruction of lives in Rwanda. We are saying that, was there a need for journalists in Kenya to say, oh, guys, within our neighborhood, things are happening in a bad way. Can we take proactive action and help and intervene? For me, again, that was a good photo.
Yeah, the picture on the Star that showed bodies in
so
Sudan.
the gravity of the issue and the weight of that matter and the implication of keeping silence really should be weighed against the issues of the Court of
You would seem to me to be saying that it's okay to show it's a foreign picture of atrocities committed in
not foreign. I've just said
Yeah.
that even in our Kenyan situation, if we are able to balance it, we are able to look at the issues of the gravity of the issue.
How do you tell people
And
this is this bad? Yeah, that's the question.
That's what I'm saying.
Patrick, what do
I
you
mean, I
Briefly,
think I agree with him. I think the question here is, what is the function of the picture on the front page? Is it just gratuitous violence? Is it just sensationalism? I'm trying to sell many papers, so let me put a shocking photograph there. Or are you actually trying to communicate something across? You know, it's not the picture itself that determines that, but it's a context within which or how it's being used. And I think in that case, what was on the Sunday Nation immediately after Westgate was gratuitous, you know, in terms of what it was trying to portray. And then also there is issues that he mentioned of protecting the victims, you know, and their family members. You know, people seeing their mom or their sister on the front page of the whatever in an obvious state of shock and then blooded all over. There are questionable issues that come there that I think would need to be addressed. A question for me is, again, whether it's just gratuitous or you're just putting it there for the sake of having it, or are you actually trying to drive a
When women demonstrated on the street at Uhuru Park during the RPP issues there that time, there was a big issue whether I was nation then.
Right.
We had a debate. Do we publish those pictures or not? If we don't publish the pictures, those women were protesting.
Right.
They were not at
Nobody will know about that if you don't publish
if
the
you don't
pictures.
publish them.
Yeah,
So the issue was, these women are not in the right club. They are making a political point.
Yeah, that's the point.
So we chose.
Yeah.
And that's the kind of thing to determine.
Yeah, let's on the security operations that have been going. Again, the media have been attacked for trying to go behind to try and find out how the operations are being done, or that no, let the police do their work. The media should not intrude in the operations. Gadara, what is your view?
I find it interesting that media being. I would be criticizing them for actually not going behind the thing and not asking the questions. I mean, take Usalama Watch, for example. Usalama Watch conflated two issues: terrorism with quote-unquote illegal immigration and refugees. And the government seemed to say that it is refugees and illegal immigrants who are responsible for the terrorism, you know. And we went along with it. It wasn't questioned, you know, how do they know this? You know, the one person who we have actually jailed for terrorism was not an illegal immigrant, you know, was a Kenyan, actually a non-Somali Kenyan, to put it that way, you know. So these conflations and these narratives coming out of government, I don't feel are adequately questioned. You know, what's the narrative out of Westgate? Why aren't we asking questions about that? You know, how did it happen? What happened for 4 days inside that mall? How could 4 people, so we are told, withhold the might of the KDF and the police for 4 days? You know,
right. We are running out of time a little.
Yes.
Mwangi, I mean, this is an issue. It's ongoing. Operations are still ongoing. There are complaints about, you know, media going to expose operations that are ongoing. Keep off, or should we keep off? Should we go in? As we speak, I mean, there are people still detained at Kasarani.
right.
Nobody is talking about that. The media has laid off that. Is that right? Or should the media go in and dig up?
It is very important that everything is brought to the attention of Kenyans, I would say. and that there's certain things that the state is concerned about. They were concerned about the Westgate. But the problem was the ability of the government to organize itself and release information about Westgate. They locked everyone in. The government released very disjointed information. There were so many centers of information from the government side. The journalists had a responsibility of getting out and look for a story, because there was no one who was ready to give up, to give the information. They messed up here and there, but we understand that's common. But having said that, it is important that the journalists get into the background and the depth of the stories. Ask the very hard questions, which our journalists are unable to ask. Don't bring just programs because you want to raise emotions. There was one program that about one cleric, Makaburi, not Makaburi, the other guy who was called Rogo.
Yes.
That was shown in KTN, and you can see that the narration and the presentation of photographs was aimed at raising some emotions.
That was from the police.
That was from the media. That was from the clip.
Yeah.
So basically, we are saying that we need to be able to say what is the objective here.
Yeah.
What is the objective of these photographs? You
Yeah.
know? So those are the issues. And are we asking the most relevant questions, or we are just very superficial in our reporting?
Yeah, I think I
Finally,
just
yeah.
ask
Yes.
one quick thing.
Yes.
I think the press a lot of times does not simply regard the government as one of the many players in a story. And in a very real sense, they tend to think of government as the authoritative source. They publish what I would call a official truth, the truth according to government, as if that is true.
And the government
because
may
the
never have the
government
truth,
says it.
in fact.
Not just the government may not have it. The government has a real incentive to disinform.
Yes.
You know, so we need to be people who question what the government tells us. You know,
Yeah.
How can we
and
do
then
that?
look for other sources of
How
information
can we
can
do
either
that?
corroborate or highlight some
How
of
can
the
we do that and not be accused of being not patriotic?
Well,
Because that-
patriotism again, and
Yeah.
that's a good question.
Yes.
Patriotism is not about supporting the government. Patriotism is defending the interests of the country, even against the government in power. You
Yeah,
know.
that patriotic talk must bring us to an end. But first, talking about patriotism, in fact, we are back to those days where editors get summoned.
Yeah.
The Standard got summoned for the story about the cabinet retreat to Mount Kenya Safari Club. They wrote a story that said that it cost about 100 million. The story said they had tried to reach out to get figures they could not get. And that was a story that was flashed at the weekend meeting, World Press Freedom Day conference as an example of bad journalism. That boils down to you, Mwangi, Media Council of Kenya. Should the government have brought the complaint to you, or summoned the editors and the management of the Standard to State House?
It was very unfortunate if they were summoned. Very unfortunate.
They were summoned.
They were summoned.
And
there
consequences followed from that summon.
There is a mechanism of dealing with the complaints. And the president himself, when he was deputy prime minister, appeared at the Media Council under the Complaints Commission, and his case was resolved. So there is a mechanism that is laid in our laws that if you have a complaint against the media, come to the Complaints Commission of the Media Council. It is going to be resolved. But the issues of summoning the journalists, one, it is an issue of trying to compromise them. Number two, it's an issue of trying to harass them and to hide the truth, which again we are trying to fight. So for me, it was quite unfortunate incident of summoning journalists just to
So if you are summoned,
explanation.
suppose now I'm summoned, what do you advise me to do?
Well, I mean, here's the thing.
We have to-
The act of summoning itself, I think, was wrong. That should never have happened. If the government or if the president has a problem, as he said, go to the Media Council. The issue, and going back to where we started, is that the government is in the process of undermining that Media Council. The KICA bill is what is doing that. You know, so they
Well-
have no confidence that they can control the Media Council. So therefore, they try and circumvent it. You know,
All right,
and we should oppose that. I think.
All right, of course, Aaron's territory has been swiftly, taken away by that action of the president, State House summoning, the Standard editorship and management of a story they didn't like. But there you have it. That is the state of our press freedom today. We continue to discuss whether the media is doing its work properly. If you are unhappy with any content in the media, there is the Media Council of Kenya, which listens to complaints and adjudicates disputes between government and the citizens and media, citizens, media and government, all of them. Thank you for watching, and keep watching Power Breakfast.